Okay, my name's Dave Scott. I work for Chevron, and as some of you will know, we have a large FPSO currently inside Dubai Drydock. Just a little bit about myself. Started work as an engineering apprentice a long time ago. Became a chief engineer with BP Tanker Company and got a BSc in engineering the hard way. So I guess my first excursion into the land of inspection, plant and equipment inspector for ICI, which some of you will know as a large chemical company working in the UK and all over the world. And I've basically been in inspection and quality assurance since, let me think, 1976. Yeah, okay. Let me try and set the scene for this expectations, ISO expectations. I guess I'll address it a little bit from a Fraja point of view. She is going to be on station for an inordinately long time, so the technical requirements for the vessel were pretty high. We want her to be out there for 18 years and never come off station, okay? She's already 36 years old, so you can understand that we were pretty thorough with what we wanted done to the vessel technically, especially with a view to extending her life, okay? We awarded the contract, and again this is all scene setting, to a contractor, an office that did not have any experience of an FPSO project of this size. Now the parent office had plenty of experience, but this particular office had very limited experience, okay? And we made it worse. We wanted it done very quickly, okay? It was an extremely fast-track project. So what I've done is here, I've selected a few areas where I've put the expectation up, and I'm going to try and explain where I think we either met or we didn't quite meet what Chevron's expectations were with regard to the ISO, okay? The shipyard was almost selected by default. Originally there was a slot somewhere else in the world. We spent so long in negotiations, we missed that slot. So Dubai Drydock by default almost got the work, okay? Wonderful facility. No one has any doubts this is a wonderful facility to come and work in, yeah. The fabrication facilities, they picked themselves because they were adjacent to the shipyard. There's quite a few of them, so we were selective in where we went, and we picked what turned out also to be excellent fabrication facilities. Yeah, very good. The expectation was that all of these facilities would have ISO, that it would be robust, that people would understand their roles within the ISO requirement, and that the QMS would be an integral part of what they were doing, not something that they had as a marketing tool, okay? Quality, if you do it right, everything follows it. The ISO is very good that way. All of the areas that are in the ISO, if you do them correctly, you will do projects efficiently, and you will produce good quality. We need to make more people believe that, people in quality. If you follow the specific areas that are addressed in the ISO specification, if you do them correctly, you will do good work. You'll plan it well, you'll do good quality, and you'll have good resources. Everything is there, you just have to use it correctly. There's a lot of people spend a long time developing these specifications. Our expectation in Chevron that there would be thorough pre-award audits, both from a technical and from an HSE point of view. There would be an understanding of the work that was to be contracted. Preferably, the facilities we went to would have previous experience with the EPC contractor. There would be an established list of subcontractors that the EPC's main contractors would have lists of subcontractors that they'd used before and were able to call on these people as and when required. And most importantly, we needed the resources available to do the work, because as you probably know, Fraja kicked off probably about the worst time possible for a large project, when when shipyards, fabrication facilities, suppliers were all getting orders from all over the world, and the ball was very much in their court. So from an EPC contractor and an end-user client point of view, very, very difficult time to go out to get this type of work done. So one of their prime expectations is the scope of the work and the technical requirements would be fully reviewed and assessed. Okay? Now this applies equally to our EPC contractor, to their main contractors, and to the subcontractors of these contractors. Everyone should understand what they're being asked to do and make sure that they highlight areas where they are going to have a problem complying with specification requirements, or having sufficient resources to do the job, or having adequate experienced supervision to be able to ensure the job is done. And another, I guess, one of the areas where we have had a problem is that because it's so large and so complex, that moving from one phase to another, having adequate resources in place to enable us to move from a construction phase into a completion phase, into a testing phase, has been difficult. We never seem to have been able to be on top of that. We're always lagging behind at the transition, okay? And that has, well, obviously that has effects on the progress of the project, okay? Expectation, all of the primary contractors would have adequate planning resources assigned to the project. Planning from the go-get on this one has been a problem. And it is, for me, it's one of the basic, most fundamental parts of ISO is planning, okay? If you can't plan it correctly, you can't do it correctly. You must put adequate resources to planning a project of this size and complexity. And you must pass through your organisation enough information to enable subcontractors to plan and execute their work effectively. That's absolutely vital, especially on a thing as big as this, on a ship as big. We also would have expected that we would have had good availability of subcontractors, approved subcontractors, and that they would be reasonably aware of what an offshore FPSO's quality requirements were. And probably that there would have been some kind of requirement for them to actually, if the main contractor had insufficient QC, inspection, QA, HSE coverage, that they would, in their contract, they would be required to provide some of that themselves. And that was an expectation we definitely had when we came here to Dubai. Keep coming, this theme going through all the time, thorough understanding the contract commercial and technical requirements. I emphasise it again, This is a big requirement in ISO, that you do a thorough review of what you're being asked to do. The next one is to read the specs, read the scope of work, and compile a list of exceptions and discuss agreed compliance or compromise up front. If we go over the work that the UAE, the EPC contractor, his main contractors and their subcontractor, if we go through the number of times we've been involved in discussions about exceptions to specification. Now there will always be some exceptions to specification, that's not an issue, but we need to do a better job identifying a bigger percentage of them up front and mitigating their effects. Okay, we need to review more thoroughly the contract, the technical specifications of what we're being asked to do. And I've been at the other end, and I know it can be a pain. If I'm a piping manager and I'm asked to review a contract and I've got a pipe shop that's working flat out, where do I get time to review that contract? But believe me, it's time well spent if you do that. You have to review what you're being asked to do. And the last one, that we cascade down appropriate specifications to all our subcontractors. Okay, a desire to comply with the contractual requirements and to promote good customer focus. Where issues re compliance with technical requirements are identified, a desire to discuss with the client and the end user and reach agreement on the way forward. Not to hope that perhaps we won't notice there's a problem and it'll go away. Because that's not the way to promote customer focus, okay? Bring it out in the open, talk about it, and 9 times out of 10, you'll find that your client and his end user, if that's the situation you're in, will be understanding to the best of their ability, yeah? You may not agree with it, but you will get a far better reception than if you try and hide it and hope that it's never noticed, yeah? Competent workforce. I think we have asked the question numerous times, and we never have a problem with adequate numbers. Adequate numbers we always have. It's the level of the supervision of the adequate numbers that's the problem, and that's been true both in the engineering phase and in this phase. We need to, if we're going to bring people who are relatively inexperienced, relatively untrained, we need to have a way of making sure we have adequate supervision for these people. Both up in Abu Dhabi and here, we've had situations frequently where we think people are doing nothing, and it looks really bad, but that's not the case. What they're doing is they're waiting for a supervisor to come along and tell them what to do next, because they don't know. So we really need to have adequate levels of supervision available. There's no point in bringing another 500 workers and no supervision. Okay? Supervision is absolutely critical. And in this marketplace, I know how difficult it is to get good engineers, good managers, and good foremen of the black trades, or whatever you want to call it. Good people are hard to get, very hard to get. Provision of an acceptable work environment. Okay, well, when we came to Dubai, many of us had lots of experience of working in the Gulf, and you know, it really is in everyone's interest that we do our best to provide as good work conditions as we can for our people. And we should never, there should be no reason for a client to have to push to get adequate personal facilities provided in the workplace. That reason should never be there. Your workers won't work if they're not being looked after. You have to take care, be it the main contractor or the subcontractors, you have to look after the personal care of your people. We've been constantly engaged in trying to improve the working conditions of the people, and we shouldn't have to do that. You know, provision, product realization, provision of project-specific resources expectation. First one we've seen before, but the second one, identification of any areas where procedures, processes, documentation, records need to be modified or written to ensure compliance with the project requirements. And the last one, identification of any job functions that will require to be enhanced to ensure seamless execution. What I'm trying to say there is that if it's not norm, and your normal QA, your normal QMS system will not cope with it without running into roadblocks or choke points or whatever you want to call it, that review process is where you have to identify where you're going to have these issues. If you're going to have to enhance people, you know, provide more people into a function, you've got to identify that up front. Pretty critical. I'm sure we all know the areas that I'm kind of indicating. And where we need special procedures, hasn't been so much of that. Some, but again, it's important. If there's a function or a process in the facility that's not going to manage what the contract is asking it to manage, we should try and identify that and at least either put something in place to mitigate it, or discuss it with the client and agree to do it in a different way. I mean, that's what we have to do here. Review requirements. I mean, I talked to all the people in the organisation. I talked to some of the other people, and they all had the same theme, recurrent theme. Simply to adequately review what you're being asked to do. This first one here, we actually did there was an audit done, a kick-off audit was done by the engineering contractor before we started work here, at all the facilities in the UAE. And it was identified in 2 of them that actual review of the contract requirements and technical specifications would be an issue. And I mean, it was argued quite strongly that it would never be an issue. But it has been proven that it has been an issue, that maybe the review wasn't wide enough within the facility, or for some reason it didn't identify all the areas where we were running the issues. Chevron have had very little input into the procurement that's been done in the UAE. We had far more input into what was done from back in the US. But anyway, the expectation is thorough review of the RFQ, request for quotation, issue of all the relevant specifications. Now, we've definitely had issues with that here with the subcontractors and their subcontractors. People think that giving people a pile of specifications is too much for them and it overwhelms them. And that can be true, but you have to identify what ones are critical and what ones they need. And that you have to make sure they get them. Yeah? We thought we'd have more extensive approved vendor lists and subcontractor lists, but that proved not to be just as good as we hoped it would be. Setting the material criticality levels assigned and inspection levels set accordingly. That our expectation is, that's what happens, and we sign off on the vendor ITP plans, and then someone in a contractor's office makes a decision that he's not going to inspect as per the ITP, and he doesn't tell anybody. It happens all the time. He's saving money. Not relevant to the UAE, but there was a policy within one of the main contractors where they didn't inspect, if they let a big package, say a turbo generator package, they didn't inspect subcontractors' work. So the first opportunity to look at this, a control panel or a lube oil sked, was when it arrived at the main contractors. Too late, eh? Fast track, too late. Nothing we can do about that. We're in, how do we accept it? What's a bit, so. I've always been a believer that if you get a good inspector in early enough, it's far better to do 1 or 2 visits early and not simply concentrate on going in at the end and witnessing a test. See if you can, 1, visit the subcontractors, and 2, see if you can visit them early to make sure they have the right information to do their job and provide you with what you want. We've had terrible problems with packages, particularly those from the US of A. Well, okay, I answered that for that one, to be honest. I don't know. Well, gentlemen, it was very quick. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Personally, I've enjoyed my experience here in Dubai. So, any questions? Great, thank you very much.